is fear is an acronym for false emotion appearing real. You can actually buy into the fact that fear doesn't exist, we imagine it. Now, I'm not talking about the instinct for life that stops us walking out in front of buses. So, you know, you take one of the fear essences, you don't suddenly start doing stupid things and driving at 90 miles an hour down the wrong side of the road. That's not the sort of fear I'm talking about. That's an instinct for life. But to the fears that actually just block the free flow of our energy. And of course it starts, well, it can start at the base chakra, but that sacral chakra is where it really begins to stop us being as creative and stop us being. And if we stop trusting what is outside or what is deep inside ourselves. And the final one is the base chakra. And our base chakra is about our safety, it's about drive, it's about, you know, knowing that whatever happens, we're safe. And when it's out of balance, then that despondency and despair we feel is the despondency and despair of losing everything at a physical level. Not having a roof over our heads, not being able to feed ourselves. We get a lot of, we're very interested in raw food and also wild food at the moment. And one of the magazines that we get is called Fresh Network. And they had a very good article the other day about wild food, and they were saying that one of the strongest emotional things is our need to eat. Actually, that came up earlier, didn't it? But it's one of the things that sometimes makes us most fearful if times are hard or things are difficult, is how am I going to eat? What happens if I haven't got the money to eat? Now, as a youngster, I solved this by just finding fellas to go out to dinner with, but I can't do that now. So, actually, if you are able to identify wild plants that you can eat, then you don't have a problem, do you? It's all around you. The food is out there. And in fact, we moved into a place a few years ago and I'd asked for it to supply everything we needed to eat. And I then spent the next 3 years trying to clear all the chickweed and the dandelions and the docks and the mallow plants and everything else. And it wasn't until I'd gone through a further bit that I realised that actually I didn't need to go to the supermarket. I had more, the nettles, everything. I had more than enough to eat to keep us for months on end. And yet there I was digging them all up. I can't get any courgettes to grow with all these dandelions. Eat the dandelions. So, despondency and despair is also about our attachment to our incarnation in this life. Because it is as we come in, we involute in through the chakras from spiritual energy, from a soul into this physical entity. And then we spend the rest of our lives from the base chakra working our way back up, trying to make some sense of it and find our way home.
It's instinctive, isn't it, that base chakra? It's your fight and flight and all this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So, does that help you to understand? Can you see that connection between them? So what I want to take you into now is how do we, let's just quickly look at the rationale. Those negative states that Bach described are the opposite of the balanced state of the chakras. Yeah? And one of the things that we used as a clincher for this was we looked at the poster that the Bach Centre still sells, which is looks like a dartboard. And on it, it says, the colours on this poster are as denoted by Dr. Bach in his original drawing. And the colours, when you look at them, are the colours of the chakras. Except for one, and that's the brow. And we think possibly that Dr. Bach was very much he was very conscious of having heartfelt intuition, and he possibly identified that where that was coming from as being the thymus chakra. Yes. But on the other hand, there is another explanation that I quite like. Dr. Bach was a Mason, and he had a lot of understanding of esoteric work and one thing and another. But he also had an understanding of secrets and of keys. And I think he put that slightly differently, because for somebody to unlock the key, they had to understand what the pattern was. Does that make sense? And so unless anybody actually understood that, then to other people it would actually turn it into a nonsense. So, interesting. Right, how does this help us with creating our own reality? I was talking to you a minute ago about the involuting energy and the evoluting energy. The involuting energy comes in through from the crown down to the base. The evoluting energy is described in the book very clearly as the 7 ages of man. Have you come across the 7 ages of man before? No? Basically, at every 7 years, you go through a chakra level. Now, when you come in as a baby, it's not that you haven't got any chakras, but you've got little chakras and the energy is there, but it's not full blown. And as we work through our lives, we develop those chakra emotional strengths. Because if you have any dramas or problems during those times, those chakras will often be closed down or hold tension or hold certainly blockages that will affect not only them and the way they work, but they'll affect the next chakras up because the energy can't lift itself up as well. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Now, when we talked about creating our own reality, that is that inspired thought coming down through the chakras. Now, everybody talks about you have to think, you have to have a thought, and then you have to visualise it. And then they sort of say act as if it's happening, and then you have to allow it to happen. But it's all a little bit vague, and much as they try and describe what you have to do, unless you can understand that pattern, and then you have a problem where you say, well, okay, no, that's where it is. Now I'm blocking there, I know that's a block. The problem then is, what do I do about it? Well, being able to identify it through the chakras, we can use those essences to release the blocks at that level. Are you following it? Mm-hmm. Good. So, we have the crown chakra. This is where we get the inspiration from. This is the inspired thought. This is the idea that we're going to do something. We then come down to the brow, which is where we visualise it. If we can't visualise it, if we have an inspired thought, we can't actually visualise ourselves doing it or having it, then it's not going to be, is it? You know, people say, oh, I can never imagine me doing that. There, you've just done it. You've just cleared it. It won't happen. You've got to be able to imagine it happening. Then the organisation. Now, this is where, remember I said this was the blueprint? If we don't do some organisation to give this thing that's going to come into manifestation a pattern, then it hasn't got a pattern to go into, it hasn't got a space to build itself into. Once we've done that, now the heart chakra is the centre of the chakras. There's 3 above and 3 below. That's why it's about balance. But it's also the heart centre. It's where we hold our love. But it's also where we hold our desire.